Hey guys, in today's episode I'm just going to do a top book review. So my first book that I've got here in the top 5 book review is Grandpa's Great Escape by David Walliams. Basically it's reviewed: in his old age, a grandpa has become confused and he believes he is back in his World War II days when he was in the RAF Spitfire pilot. Only one person can understand him, his grandson Jack, and together they embark on the greatest escape of their lives. So this is a really good and fascinating book. I really like the imagery that's used in the book. It's really a fascinating read for kids, and I think they'll really like, if they like David Walliams as a comedian and stuff like Little Britain, they'll really enjoy this book. And it's really at the heart of it a family kind of hard feel for young kids, which I really think they'll like. That's the 5th one, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Susan Collins, the author of The Hunger Games. In the morning of the reaping that will kick off the 10th annual Hunger Games in the capital, 18-year-old Cornelius Snow is preparing one of his one-shot glory. Mentor of the Hunger Games, the once mighty house of Snow has fallen on hard times, its fate hanging on the slender chance that Cornelius will outcharm, outwit and outmaneuver his fellow students to mentor the winning tribute. The odds are against him. He's been given the humiliating assignment of mentoring the female tribute from District 12, the lowest of the low. Their fates are now completely intertwined. Every choice Cornelius makes could lead to favour or failure, triumph or ruin inside the arena. It will be the fight to the death. Outside the arena, Cornelius starts to feel for his doomed tribute and must weigh his need to follow the rules against his desire to survive no matter what it takes. Again, this is a really fascinating and good book to read. Being a fan of the main Hunger Games trilogy, it's really a good place to actually understand how the Hunger Games actually were established for the first Hunger Games books, and then how that reaches out into the actual trilogy itself, and how Cornelius, President Snow in the main trilogy, actually becomes to be. So I've really liked it as it sets out the imagery, the kind of story of what actually changes beforehand, and actually makes you empathise a bit more for what actually happened with President Snow in the main trilogy. The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. The Tattooist of Auschwitz is based on the true story behind one of the most potent symbols of the Holocaust, the blue numbers tattooed on prisoners' arms. When Leo Skolov, a Slovakian Jew, was given the job of tattooer in that terrible place, forced literally to scratch numbers into his fellow victims' arms in indelible ink. He used the infinitesimal freedom of movement this position awarded him to exchange jewels and money taken from murdered Jews for food to keep others alive. If he had been caught, he would have been killed. Many owed him their survival. There has been countless books about the Holocaust, but none quite like this. Leo Skolov understood exactly what was in store for him and his fellow prisoners, and he was determined not just to survive, but to live his life to the full. Terrible though his story is, it is one of hope and courage, and incredibly, it's a love story. Waiting in the line to be tattooed, terrified and shaking, was a young girl. For Leo, a Jack the lad, a bit of a chancer, it was love at first sight. And his and Gita's story, fact-checked against all available documentary evidence, endorsed by the Sun they never thought they would have, and untold for over 70 years, will make you weep, but it will also uplift you. For here, in the very worst of circumstances, is the very best of humanity. I don't think you can explain much more in that kind of brief of what the story is. It's totally hard-hitting for anyone who actually has read about the Holocaust and has actually been able to read the story. It's an incredible story of survival, hope against all odds, and a very kind of story that you wouldn't expect to come out of such a kind of place that you hear about through accounts that are more kind of outcoming. So this is a fabulous read, very hard-hitting, but I think for any readers, more mature readers, will really like this story. At number 2 is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the 7th book and the final, the second to final book, or the final book if you choose not to include the play. So Harry Potter is preparing to leave the Dursleys and Privet Drive for the last time, but the future that awaits him is full of danger, not only for him but for anyone close to him. And Harry has already lost so much. Only by destroying Voldemort's remaining Horcruxes can Harry free himself and overcome the Dark Lord's forces of evil. In this dramatic conclusion to the Harry Potter series, Harry must leave his most loyal friends behind, and in the final perilous journey find the strength and the will to face his terrifying destiny, a deadly confrontation that is his alone to fight. This is a really good book. I suggest you read all the books, the 6 previous books, before you read this, but it's a really good conclusion, a tie into the films, because this was the inspiration behind the parts 1 and 2. I've read the entire series plus the final novel, which is an additional one to the play, but I really like this. It's a fabulous read. Bit different to the conclusion that you see in the film, I must admit, but it's a really good book, and that's why it's at number 2, because it's still so popular considering it's been out for nigh on plus 10 years. But number 1, I think for a lot of this was one of my favourite books as a kid, is Shadow. So Shadow. Never have a man and his mother needed a friend more when the Springer Spaniel appears, thin and war-ravaged in the mouth of their Afghanistan cave, where they struggle to survive in a world of poverty, corruption, and police brutality. Nursed back to health, the dog becomes a constant companion, a shadow, and that's what a man decides to call her. But life in Afghanistan becomes more dangerous by the moment. Eventually, a man and his mother and Shadow find the courage to embark upon the treacherous journey from war-torn Afghanistan to the safety of a relative home in Manchester, England. But how far can Shadow lead them? And in this terrifying new world, is anywhere really safe? This really talks about social issues in the kind of how immigration back in the time, because this book is, I believe, over 10 years old, released, I think it was, in 2010. So it kind of talks about how immigration changes the system. So this is kind of a political speaking book, but as a book that I've read before in school and stuff like that, I really do enjoy it for its because it is illustrated in some places, as you can see there, but it's a really fascinating book that I think a lot of young people can engage with as a story that is very relevant. I'm surprised it's never been adapted for film, but it's a really, really fascinating book, and that's why it makes my top.